And this Kirblog topic was suggested by Maroon Pickle. If you'd like to suggest future topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear them before they officially release, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kirbifer. If you think Kirblogs are dead and gone, find a link below to my Patreon. Throw a couple bucks to make a suggestion to me. Wow, how shameless can I get? 2 plugs back to back, both in intro and song form. I know, I'm the worst. That said, I am very excited about doing this particular topic because this is something highly relevant to my interests as a writer, which I've been focusing on quite a bit the last couple of years on my writing end of my work. I was asked to talk about my favorite types of character dynamics in fiction. And I'm going to put something at the just right here first before I start talking about this. I'm not going to be counting romantic character dynamics because I consider that to be a whole nother category in and of itself, to be honest. And that's not to say that I don't love, I mean, those of you who don't already know, I'm all about shippy stuff. I'm way into that. It's just that I want to focus specifically on not aromantic relationships between characters, because certainly the ones I'm going to talk about, could become romantic or even do, or could be interpreted that way, certainly. But I want to focus on like platonic or otherwise, or just other types of relationships. And hey, you know what? Who knows? Maybe I might do a separate Kirblog topic in the future about my favorite kind of romantic shippy type relationships between characters. But yeah, so I want to focus on other stuff. Just wanted to put that out there at the beginning of this in case people maybe get the wrong idea about it. But I've been a writer for a long time. I started writing stuff like, down on paper as proper stories when I was in elementary school, probably like 3rd or 4th grade or so. And I really started analyzing characters. I always like took to characters in different ways, and really couldn't describe what it was that I liked about them and the interpersonal relationships between them in the stuff I was watching growing up until probably around like mid high school, early college, when I started being a lot more analytical about filmmaking and just character relationships in general, and then it kind of opened up my brain to how I started rewriting my own stuff, because a lot of it before was just sort of emulating what I was experiencing from these characters, but not really understanding what it was that was making them so connectable and enjoyable for me in the first place. So I've got 3 different examples that I'm going to cover with some different, or 3 different types of character dynamics that I really like, with different examples from things that I'll be talking about in those. So the first one will probably come to no surprise to, anybody that knows my work, and specifically if you know Tome. And I love large teams of characters that are designated together, not just as like a group of friends or something, but as a team that work together. And a lot of the early examples that I was into regarding this didn't have a whole lot of depth. I almost say that just my brain kind of was drawn to them first and foremost because they just kind of had bright colors that kept me, focused and entertained in that sense. So, the characters from Thomas the Tank Engine, the 7 Dwarves from the original Disney Snow White and the 7 Dwarves, and then the Power Rangers, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers when that hit the States. And not to say that there isn't depth to those characters, because even on the low end, like the preschool world of things, the Thomas characters, I actually do think have a level of depth in terms of the stories that they have, but not so much as a team. They're more co-workers, if anything else. I would argue that the 7 Dwarves are kind of a combination of co-workers and kind of a familial connection, but other than their one personality trait, I would even argue, like in the original movie, Grumpy is the only one that has any real sort of, distinct depth and personality at all. And then the Power Rangers from, that sort of era of my life, certainly they do have a level of depth, but it's still like very watered down and very kind of straightforward in a certain sense, to where like even when I went back years later and rewatched those episodes and even compared to the Zyuranger, the original Sentai versions of those characters, like they have character to them, and I do like the team just them being together as like a team of good that fight alongside each other and kick ass together and are cool and are friends with each other separately. I think that it was just that very basic concept, regardless of how, and I'm sure people that probably love and know Power Rangers a lot more deeply than I do beyond like, the first few seasons that I watched as a kid, could probably argue better, in which case, please leave comments because I'd love to know, and especially about the later series that I never saw or some of the comics or anything, But I think it was just that basic idea of a bunch of characters, anywhere from like 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 to whatever, being in a team together. That I just thought was really cool, and I wanted that in my life. And so when I started making real friends in like, late elementary school and going into middle school, having a solid group of friends that I knew I could rely on and see every day. And, when we would do our little kind of like play pretend LARPing stuff that was kind of the building blocks for Balancing Act. That was all kind of founded off of, I think we had kind of a mutual, like, I'm sure we all grew up with Power Rangers and whatever else had that similar kind of thing to it. But it wasn't until, I kind of fell in love in a deeper sense with a lot of the DC characters. I had always known who they were. I'd known Batman and Superman and all them, but it was specifically, the Justice League animated series, followed by, Teen Titans a few years later. Even to a certain extent, Static Shock, but Static was a little bit more of a solo act, even with Richie and everybody. And then eventually, years down the line, Young Justice. Those teams are when I started to have a sense of like, okay, there is a lot more depth to these characters. I think that the original 7 members of the Justice League in that animated series, in particular, that was a big game changer for me in terms of, okay, now I'm understanding really what it means to be a team. I think that like the building blocks of that in Power Rangers of like, when you have a shared sort of responsibility or an individual sense of duty that you have within yourself, and that's what bonds you together, is to form a team in the first place because you share in that sense of duty and you want to shoulder that responsibility together. That's what it means to be a team of superheroes. And even though I know probably a lot of people have like superhero fatigue because of, MCU or otherwise, or just, because it's such a prevalent thing, I think that that's, that in particular, that's one major trait that really drew me to view these characters as like also role models. I think that that's why that sort of dynamic of that, kind of setup, really spoke to me, is because it was something that I wanted to aspire to, of like, to be like a person as good as that, and to have like-minded people surrounding me that shared in those same ideals of like wanting to do good and wanting to do something good together, And then as some of the other shows I was watching, like, Kids Next Door did a great job of this. And then also years later, when I got much more into it and I was working on the show, watching the 90s classic Sailor Moon series, watching the proper dub of this. Something that I really love about, longer form type of series and games and things where they have a lot more room and a lot more time to illustrate this kind of thing, is when you have individual stories and moments when individual members of a team get to communicate with each other and bond and develop. That was something, if those of you who have seen the Tome series and played the Tome video game will also know that this is something that I tried to exemplify a lot in what I had come up with for these different kind of episode plots, where, I tried to have a different combination of characters from the main group, like the Dandy Alliance, like, in the game, for example, those different stages that you'd be going to throughout the course of, a single chapter of the game, you would have a different combination of, you as the player character bonding with 2 or 3 each of the different members of the group. And by the end of the game, you got to see basically how each of the individual members would bond with each other in different ways. You'd see how, just using Kerbifer as an example, like how does Kerbifer behave around, just Alpha, and then, the whole rest of his group, including, his best friend? And then how does, Kirb open up to, say, Nylock? Or how does he, treat GameSoft when he's trying to get to know her more? Like just seeing like the different facets of it. And then eventually, you have all those in-depth examples of like, you get to explore those individual relationships, like the interpersonal relationships between members of the group. And then when you have the full team moments or episodes that result in a good payoff, Kids Next Door would do that. I mean, the majority of Kids Next Door's episodes were all 5 of them together, but there were occasionally ones that would focus on one more than the other or a couple of them. 90s Sailor Moon series did this a lot, where they had like usually once per season, they would have like an episode or two that were about each of the individual Sailor Guardians. And then you would have like specific episodes that were about all 5 of, the inner Guardians, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus, that were all about them together. And those kind of episodes to me were like a good payoff. That were like, okay, you've learned more and more about the individual personalities and hopes and dreams and aspirations of the separate team members. And then when you get them all together and they've developed a little bit or they've grown a little bit and you've learned more and you have more context for who they are and why they're doing what they're doing, that I really love. And the DC series I mentioned, it's funny. Not that some of the anime stuff I was watching didn't necessarily have that too, but it was more so the American cartoons when it comes to this type of character dynamic, that were speaking to me a lot more. Justice League, I think especially because watching Justice League in like the early 2000s when I was like, gosh, I think I would have been still like 12, 13, probably pre-teens, early teens by the time that show was airing. And that was like, it wasn't an Adult Swim show necessarily, it didn't have like necessarily super mature stuff in it, but it was treated and executed in a very mature, cool kind of way. Like it was very, it was so low key and so like realistic and so like, I never felt like I was being talked down to when I watched that show. And even though say for example, Teen Titans, I got like really obsessively big into Teen Titans at the age that I was when that came out, which was, that would have been like probably 14 or 15 around that time. I was literally Kerber for 15. Teen Titans did the exact thing that I was talking about that I mentioned before, where like they would have episodes that like every season they would have a couple of episodes that would focus on the individuals, and then also each season kind of focused more on one particular member than the other. With the finale of whoever their major kind of villain was, like Raven with Trigon and Robin with Slade and Beast Boy with the Brain and all that stuff. And then individual episodes focusing on them and them kind of hanging out with other, I was thinking about the Starfire and Raven episode where they switch bodies, and it's all about the two of them bonding and getting over their differences and then, becoming better friends and better teammates by the end of that episode. Like that's exactly what I mean. And Teen Titans was a little bit more, I guess like overt and straightforward about it because it was aimed for a little bit more of a younger audience. So I look back on the show. I still love the show. It's no offense to it at all. I love the original Teen Titans series, but, I find myself going back to the likes of Justice League more often. I think because the level of maturity holds up to me and speaks to me a little bit more in terms of this particular kind of character dynamic that I like as much. There's also there's more there's another aspect to certain a character dynamic that I really love that also applies to the teammates thing, which I'll get to that. That's my third example. But I was mentioning before, most of the examples I gave were coming from American cartoons and some anime here and there. Actually, one that comes to mind is the core group from Yu Yu Hakusho, the 4 main characters of that, Kuwabara, Yusuke, Hiei, and Kurama. In fact, actually, that might even be one of the bigger examples. I talked about Tome as a big, case of where I tried to put that stuff into practice with. But the balancing act characters for the movie that I'm writing, where I have, as a film, you have less time to develop and to show those kinds of moments. But one of those things that I want to do is I want to have an individual, because there's 4 characters in that, the 4 characters that you've seen before, in the art that I've posted of them, and even some of the art that you're seeing right now. I want to have individual bonding moments between every combination of those four, like Frost and Alakua and Frost and Mantelli and et cetera, and Mantelli and Alakua. I want to have those kinds of moments between each of them throughout the movie as well, as much as possible. And then same thing, have those bonding moments, paid off, with moments of all four of them together working as a team when they've learned and developed more and they've grown, and then the audience understands more about, what they're all about and everything. On the, what I was going to say though, on the anime side, the second major, example of a great character dynamic that I'm a huge fan of personally, and that anime I think has done more commonly better than other stuff that I've been into, is I really enjoy well-developed rival characters, and especially when one of them is a redeemable villain, or at least a redeemable antagonist. While I am a tremendous shonen fan, as I know all of you are probably well aware of if you've known me and my work for many years, weirdly enough, I feel like half of the shonen series that I watch, and particularly when it comes to Jump, do it perfectly, and the other half really, really frustrate the absolute crap out of me. Ones that I think of that do annoy the piss out of me are like Naruto and Sasuke. Admittedly, I fell off with following every little bit of the Naruto Sasuke stuff because I didn't finish all of Shippuden. But I did watch the final battle, and I followed like what was going on enough, and it didn't particularly feel satisfying to me. There were elements of it in the really early beginning stuff, and then some elements of it throughout the later stuff that I kind of appreciated. In terms of like, more so on the side of Naruto's determination of like, no matter what, I'm going to bring you back to the good side on it because I'm never going to stop believing in you and etc. Like that's a commendable thing. But Sasuke was not. This is the problem is usually I like the hero, like the character that's framed as the hero, as the protag. I like what they do, but sometimes it's the rival character that just makes me want to bang my freaking head against the wall. Sasuke was one of those. Even learning more about his backstory and everything, I was just like, you're too annoying to me. Another example of that, and I know this is going to be blasphemous to people because everybody loves him, Kaiba. This is an example of, I love the dynamic, the actual story stuff that happens between Yugi and Kaiba in original Yu-Gi-Oh! But I love Yugi / Yami Yugi. I don't like Kaiba. I really, really, really don't like Kaiba. He just aggravates me so much with the choices and even the good aspects of him, and the fact that like he's very determined and he never gives up and he loves his brother and would do anything to save his family, and he's a self-made man and like fought really hard to get where he is in his position of power and everything. And that's great. Like those are good aspects to his character, but it's the execution of him where he's just also, admittedly, it's even though the dub has like a nostalgic, thing, like a soft spot for me, or that I have one for it. The dub also kind of like, it like muddies that relationship because the execution of Kaiba, especially in the English version, is so aggravating. And that's a whole nother subject. I've talked to death about that in other Yu-Gi-Oh! Kirblog's in the past, so I'm not going to harp on that too much, but that's one that bothers me. Thinking of other ones, I mean, I'm kind of curious to see how the Ichigo Uryu stuff goes in Bleach, the new season that I'm watching. I'm enjoying the season so far, but I've not been seeing much of how that's going necessarily. Deku and Bakugo, Deku and Bakugo I have enjoyed a good chunk of. Some of it was frustrating to me in the early seasons. Then it was getting a little bit better. I remember the fight and a little bit of spoilers for My Hero Academia, just fair warning. Some of the moments that I think of that I really liked, like the battle that they have outside the like school or the hotel or wherever they were, that ends in Bakugo crying. Like he's like, why can't I beat you? Why can't I beat you? And understanding a little bit more the sensitive side to him. I liked that. I didn't like that I feel like we needed to have a little bit more of, why he is the way he is that justifies why he's an asshole all the time. And especially to Deku, like emphasizing his jealousy and his bitterness, like just things that they could have done. I feel like to kind of shed a light on that a little bit better. But that said, this recent season when they have like a real level of like understanding and comeuppance, and he apologizes and he uses his real name, like that moment did really hit me. It meant a lot to me, and it did feel genuinely satisfying to me, even with the like parts that I didn't love about him as we continued onward through the story. But it has made me very much invested in the bond that the two of them have together. And even though I also kind of wish that this is a separate thing, but I do wish that Deku more would have told his secret about the All for One stuff to Ochako instead of Bakugo, or at least telling Ochako that first before telling Bakugo. That's a whole, again, that kind of dips more into the romantic territory. I'm not going to go there. And then, of course, the biggest and best example is Goku and Vegeta. If you look at, and I'm talking specifically the source material of the Z era from when Vegeta shows up in the Saiyan arc up until the end of the original manga ending of Z with when Goku flies off with Oob and everything. That stuff is fantastic. That entire rivalry and that relationship. It's funny because when Chris Sabat, if you ask him like, oh, what's your favorite saga? What's your favorite arc in Dragon Ball Z? Or in all of Dragon Ball in general. And he'll always say, it's not a specific story arc. It's the dynamic between Goku and Vegeta. It's that arc that lasts the entirety of the show. That's my favorite. That's what I love more than anything else. And honestly, he's very valid. I know that's kind of not really answering the question that people want to, in the way people want, but it's true. It's really true. Even as much as people kind of rip on the Buu arc, like, one of the big things that I love it for is the Goku versus Majin Vegeta stuff and why he's led to that and why, he's all pissy that he got soft and everything. It's funny because like Dragon Ball is, in certain ways, like when I compare it to like One Piece, for example, which funnily enough, One Piece actually doesn't have that. One Piece definitely has the team dynamic 100%. The first example that I gave in terms of relationships that I like, dynamics and stuff. But as far as rivalry goes, not really. If anything, the Netflix show a little bit with his relationship with Kobe and them being, Pirates versus Marines rivals in that sense. But Smoker is more of that. And but even then, we don't get to experience Smoker a whole lot in the series that much, so we don't really get to explore that dynamic nearly as in depth compared to other shows. And even though like I always joke about how like One Piece is basically just better Dragon Ball, that is one of the things that I do genuinely think that Dragon Ball has over One Piece is the rivalry dynamic. And one of the other things kind of tying that in with, I don't need to, go over the specifics of why the Goku versus Vegeta stuff is as great as it is, because it kind of speaks for itself. But going from around the same time, watching Pokemon and also getting to Dragon Ball right around that same time too, and watching those shows evolve and go on. And in the case of Ash, for example, with Pokemon, Ash had a multitude of different rival characters throughout the course of that series. And even seeing Gary, I mean, we didn't get to see, I kind of wish that we did see Gary a little bit more throughout the course of the first two series. I did like that they made him grow up as a person. And then by the end of the Gold and Silver arc, when he and Ash have that big final, 6-on-6 battle with each other, and then Gary decides to become a professor afterward. I did like what they did with that, but I also felt that some of the rivalries that they created in the later series, I liked a lot more. Paul from Diamond and Pearl, some people have even said, in fact, actually, I think the director that I worked with when I worked on the Diamond and Pearl anime, he went ahead and said that he felt that Paul was the best rival character that Ash ever had, and arguably one of the most developed characters that Pokemon ever had, because he changes a lot throughout the course of that series. And even his little brief appearance and journeys seem to be kind of an exemplification of that to a certain extent too. And then I liked that some of the characters in Black and White were like recurring rivals, like seeing them here and there. And some of the ones in X and Y, like Alon, which we see his, kind of separate story, but that's a little bit of a separate case because they didn't get to know each other all that deeply. But what I think, what Pokemon exemplifies to me about the rival dynamic in general is I love that it's all about the spirit of competition. That's another element that I kind of brought into the different versions of Tome over the course of time. Even the Alpha versus Zeto dynamic, which of course has a lot of connotations between the Goku and Vegeta thing. And even in the RPG, it's kind of a rivalry between Zeto and more so Tiger Lily and even Flame Girl, actually, because of, they're both kind of after the same goal. But because it's something that's very serious to each of them, and it's not a friendly competition in that sense, it's a different kind of dynamic. There's different ways to explore the friendly rival, just the rival dynamic, like whether it be friendly or genuine fierce competition. I like that kind of dynamic has a lot of versatility to it because the competitive side of it and somebody having to come out as the winner, for whatever their reason is, whether it's just because they want to be the best at something or if they're, striving to accomplish winning something in particular because they need whatever the prize is or whatever the outcome is to, be in their favor, that kind of thing. That has such variety to it. And it's such a great motivator for the two characters involved. And so when you make those characters fully rounded out human beings, it makes that rivalry and the added fact of who are you rooting for? Are you rooting for the protag, like the hero, just because they're the hero, or are you the kind to, want to root for the rival? Like, do you connect more with the rival? Because I think I remember when I interviewed Cliff Chapin a couple years ago, and the second season of My Hero was coming out at the time, and I was making an analogy about how like I have days when I feel more like Deku, and I have days where I feel more like Bakugo, to be honest, where I feel like I'm struggling and I'm fighting really hard, and I have to get to this thing that I'm trying to accomplish just to stay on the same level as somebody else and, my peers and whatever. And then I have days where like I'm bitter and jealous and angry about things and feeling like I'm not, getting what I've earned or what I'm owed, or, I'm not at the level that I should be respected enough. I have days like that with Bakugo. And I think that kind of like being able to balance those two sort of sides of yourself when you're in a competitive sort of environment, because in my case, like I'm competitive in the field of getting freelance work, like whether it be acting or writing or animation or otherwise. And I have to be at a certain level of a competitive level of skill to get jobs in the first place. And I'm competing against my peers, most of which are my friends that I love and care about very much. But it is also to a certain extent, it is a competition. It is, we're making money, we're making our livelihoods. And that's something that is very relatable, at least to me personally. And maybe that's relatable even to people that aren't in the entertainment industry. So I think that some of that stuff translates very well, even if it's in the case of like, action, battle, competitive sport type things, whether it's a Pokemon or a Dragon Ball, type of situation. And I think that's probably part of the reasons why those sort of anime kind of created that boom so much. Like, even though people look at that stuff as, oh, it's just a toy commercial or whatever. But no, I think that there is a real heart to that matters, that is really, really genuinely inspirational, that people don't always, I don't see people talking about as much as I kind of wish, because I think that it is a genuinely really good element to have in storytelling personally. So the last, but certainly not least, of the three examples I'm giving here of my favorite character dynamics. And this one requires some explanation, but it also applies to both the team and the rivals, the previous two examples I mentioned. Characters that are quote unquote against the world, that only they can relate to. I personally even have cases where I even like it when it's just two characters, maybe even a little bit more than if it's a group. But both have a lot of value to them. Growing up with superhero stuff, I understood the concept of having to keep a secret identity from a very young age. Maybe even before Power Rangers happened. I can't quite remember, but I understood that as a concept for a very long time. And so with a lot of the stuff that I was watching growing up that had any kind of superhero element to it, I was understanding, yeah, like that's just part of how it goes. You have to keep a secret identity so that your friends and family are not put in danger, and so that you don't become this, you know, unless you go the Iron Man route where everybody knows who you are, and etc. But even past Power Rangers and you know, some of the DC stuff, there was one particular show, and I even kind of want to look up when it was because I don't remember what year this was the case. The Animorphs series. Really weird example, possibly the very first mention of that in this entire channel of my whole life. There was a TV series that was from the year oh wow, no, okay, it was before Justice League then. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so 1998, there was a live action Animorphs TV series on Nickelodeon that I watched when I was a kid, that I was a huge fan of. And that show in particular was the first case where I really, really felt, and I think it was specifically because the characters were just like, you know, young kids going to, like, I think they were in middle school or maybe high school in that show. I don't quite remember. Where it really felt like it's a bunch of people against the world. And I think it was because, like, we're just a bunch of kids. We don't have any kind of, you know, resources or anything. We don't have like a secret headquarters or anything like that. All we have is, you know, ourselves and our trust between each other as a group. That's all we have. And that really spoke to me. That was something that made that group dynamic feel extra special. Was the fact that, like, you know, there's this, like, we don't trust anybody. Oh, and also the kind of the added thing about how, like, because the villains were these, like, parasites that could possess anybody. So they were like literally even our friends and, you know, our other friends and family, like no one else can be trusted. And even though that was a very, like, dire situation that they were in, it made for an extremely compelling dynamic between characters. And it made me super invested in all five of those kids. Unfortunately, none of which I can remember the names of because it's been so long. Jake, I think, Rachel, Marco, right? Okay, I remembered three of them. I'm not as Alzheimer as I thought I was. Another example, maybe you would expect this from me considering the Mega Man obsession. It was one of those things that made me for a moment like Mega Man Star Force a little bit more than Battle Network. And who knows, maybe whenever the Star Force collection comes out, maybe I'll feel that way for real. I don't know, because I've only ever played the first one. But it was the dynamic that happens between Geostellar, who is the Mega Man of that series, and Sonia Strum, who is the role of that series when they become Mega Man and Harp Note, respectively, in that show. Or in that series, rather. I'm talking about specifically the video game. The mission where Sonia is introduced, and the fact that the two of them relate to each other and that they're both kind of loners for different reasons. You know, they both care a lot about their parents. They, you know, both can relate to each other in terms of, oh, I also have a little electromagnetic wave alien friend that helps me transform into a superhero type thing. And Sonia immediately confiding in Geo, who's already this kind of, the like antisocial kind of disturbed sort of kid. And immediately she placed a level of trust in him because she feels that she can relate to him. And so they right away have a dynamic with each other. That was really cute to me. And I remember being really, like, heartwarmed by that relationship between them in the first game. I don't know how that develops necessarily in the second one and then the third one. But I remember that was one thing that kind of hit me in the same way that Animorphs did, where it felt legitimately like this the quote unquote against the world type of thing like that. That's the feeling that it invoked in me that I really liked and really connected with. And I think that you can definitely get that across with superhero teams in general, whether they have they're in like a big Avengers or Justice League type of situation. And hell, even the Straw Hats, going back to One Piece again. I mean, certainly the Straw Hats, I mean, they're against the world and the fact that they're criminals. They're good guys, they're pro-tags, but they're criminals in their world. So that's, it is literally them against the world in that sense. And I think that that's also part of what makes them so appealing. So they kind of really, again, other than maybe the rival part, which some of them do. Again, they have rivals. It's just not something that's visited as often as other shonen series and stories in general. They kind of tackle both of those kind of dynamics for me. And, like I said, when it comes to writing my own stories and things, that is something that I want very much to have reflected in the writing of Balancing Act. I want to invoke those kind of feelings and those kind of emotional payoffs and those sort of bonds that you feel between two characters that are very relatable from just a human standpoint. Like if you have people in your life that are those people for you, if you have someone in your life that kind of fulfills that sort of dynamic in the same way that a fictional character that you enjoy experiencing in a video game or a movie or a TV series or a book or anything. I think that that's really what that's all about at the end of the day. Like that's sort of what the takeaway needs to be. And that's what I want to improve upon in different sorts of ways than I have before. And I'm hoping that with this next project that I'll be able to do just that if I'm so lucky. So even it's funny with the Mario RPG remake coming out, I'm even kind of hoping maybe we'll see a little bit more of that with some of the new stuff they'll have in there. I don't necessarily know if they will or not. But I mean, that might have even been an early example of, a team of friends against the world in that sense. And a rival. Actually, yeah, it really was all of those things at once, wasn't it? Because, Bowser and Mario are rivals, ain't they? So, Mario RPG is once again the answer to everything. What a great note to end on. That's going to do it. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Maroon Piccolo, again, for the great question. This was a really fun topic. I hope you all took something away from it as well. Stay tuned for more details about the Charity of the Seven Stars event that'll be happening very soon. Look forward to that on October 7th. And I will also, by the way, for next month, I will have a monthly Kirblog topic voted on from my Patreon, which is, again, patreon.com/Kirbifer. And also, I'm going to have some upcoming Kirblogs for Voice October 2023 with some very lovely voice actress guests. So look forward to that. Look forward to the Rost Forest remake coming soon as well. And I hope I'll catch you all on my live stream for the Charity of the Seven Stars. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. Have a great week, whatever day this goes up. And I'll catch you all later. Bye-bye.